Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his troops on the Eastern Front are holding on despite everything. The soldiers face continuous assaults by Russian troops and mercenaries around the towns of Soledar and Bakhmut. This part of the Donbass front has seen some of the most vicious and prolonged fighting of the war. Russian military blogs recently reported breakthroughs in those areas, but neither Moscow nor Kyiv have supported those claims. Let's bring in defence expert Marina Miron from the War Studies Department of King's College London. What are you hearing about the situation on the front?
Well, the situation remains very tense after the declaration of unilateral ceasefire by Russia. Russia has resumed its operations around Bakhmut and Soledar. Soledar is being located to the north of Bakhmut. So Ukraine has announced yesterday that the Ukrainian forces are still holding Soledar, but what Russians are trying to do, especially the Wagner group, is to basically take Soledar in a semi-encirclement by cutting off the supply route to Soledar. And because according to Prigozhin, who is Wagner's chief, Soledar and Bakhmut are connected by an underground system, taking Soledar would mean that the Russians would have better chances to advance towards Bakhmut. So what they're doing is they're trying to surround Soledar from the west, coming from the south to the western part and from the north. And Bakhmut is being surrounded from the south and the east. So basically that's the position right now, but the Ukrainian forces are still holding on. They have turned the cities into a kind of fortress and are holding their positions despite this meat grinder that is there right now.
Can you explain to us why this Russian mercenary group Wagner is there and how it's changing the dynamic?
Basically, the idea to take Soledar and Bakhmut is not new. It was a strategic location when the Russians were still holding on to Izum, and the idea was to go on to take Kramatorsk and Slovansk, repeating the scenario of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. And after Russia has lost Izum, Wagner still remained in Bakhmut because that is both politically and militarily still an important aim for the Russians to take. Given its location, it would facilitate the logistics of the Russian forces there if they were to take Bakhmut. And obviously for Wagner, it's important to show some sort of progress after the Russians have lost so many key strategic cities during the last phase of their so-called special military operation.
And Marina, do you expect anything different in the fighting now that the Orthodox Christmas season is over?
Well, there is a possibility that the fighting will intensify. However, Russians are claiming that they have time, and I don't think that they will seek to increase their operational tempo. They will try to erode the morale using drones and missile strikes on key Ukrainian infrastructure while trying to kind of push to those key strategic locations and wear out the Ukrainian forces, because the idea is not only to take strategic locations, but also to destroy as many of the Ukrainian armed forces as possible.
Marina Miron, King's College London, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's bring in DW Russia analyst Konstantin Eggert, who is joining us with The View from Vilnius. Konstantin, what more are you hearing about this?
Well, there are several reports recently that top Ukrainian ground forces commander General Alexander Syrsky visited the region of Bakhmut, decorated the soldiers that are fighting there, and claimed that Bakhmut will not fall to the Russian forces. But there is not much to fall, frankly speaking, because according to the Ukrainian officials, there is not much left of the city itself. But the struggle continues, and British analysts from the Institute for the Study of War, who frequently write about developments on the front in recent months, claim that in spite of massive attacks, Russian forces will not be able to take Bakhmut quite soon. And it is interesting that this city is important as quite a few Russian media outlets claim, Russian Ukrainian media outlets claim, for the unofficial head of the Russian mercenaries of the so-called Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin. He's a billionaire businessman, and these media claim that he wants to capture Bakhmut because nearby there are important salt mines, and they are of business interest to him, which is quite an interesting and probably tragic trait to this whole battle.
And in the meantime, Russia and Ukraine both claim to have hit opposing troop concentrations over the weekend with missile strikes. What do we know about that?
Well, the Russian claims are definitely an attempt to equal the score with the Ukrainians who did hit a troop concentration, or rather makeshift barracks in the city of Makivka right before the new year. And the Ukrainians claim that they destroyed or eliminated several hundred Russian troops there. The Russians so far admitted 89 casualties, but what they claimed about yesterday's shelling, the Russians I mean, is that they essentially destroyed also hundreds of Ukrainian troops. The Ukrainians denied completely, and we do not have any footage or any proof, even unofficial proof, of Russian claims. The Ukrainians are saying that there was some damage, but no major, no casualties at all.
Inside Russia itself, we understand it's now moving to ban maps which don't conform to the Kremlin's view of Russian territory. What's behind that?
Well, that's the continuation of the propaganda war inside Russia, propaganda on the Russian population, first and foremost of all. And it is also, evidently to me at least, a sign of some bureaucrats showing loyalty to the Kremlin. Now, showing loyalty to the Kremlin now is a must for anyone on government service. How can you ban maps in the 21st century? You should ban access to the internet for people not to see them. As for print maps, for example, for school textbooks, they were already printed in the kind of Putin version of history with, for example, the Crimea being shown as Russian territory. So this is a meaningless propaganda move and a threat against those, well, remaining independent bloggers, for example, who would like to post maps that will not conform to Putin's view of history and of recent developments.
Russia analyst Konstantin Eggert in Vilnius. Thank you.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, Western allies are racing to support Ukraine with weapons and humanitarian aid. Russian missiles and drone attacks have hit Ukrainian civilian infrastructure especially hard. DW visited a logistics center in Germany that's supplying much-needed equipment for the rebuilding effort.
Tucked away in southern Germany, one of the largest humanitarian logistics operations in the country's history is underway. From here, equipment worth 70 million euros has already been dispatched to Ukraine. But for security reasons, the exact location of the site has to stay under wraps.
This logistics center is the hub for civilian relief that the federal government supplies, due to its vast facilities and the support of all the volunteers.
These packages include heaters, lights and sleeping bags for later delivery. But with Russian attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, power generators are key.
Warte mal, Fabian, du bist zu schnell. Ja, also das ist jetzt ein kleineres Stromaggregat. This is one of the smaller power generators. One of these can power about 10 households. 10 Häuser oder was versorgen. On the technical side, it works very much like a car or a bicycle dynamo. There's a diesel engine that powers the machine, and then just as with a dynamo, motion is converted into electric energy.
THW is a German federal agency and specializes in humanitarian support. Volunteers make this whole operation possible. Over the next days, these volunteers carve out time out of their daily life to deliver machinery to the Polish-Ukrainian border. Alexander Krumbach is in charge of this convoy.
Team efforts are very important. The key is to solve problems together. We have many different skills on board, and we complement each other.
Kronbach usually works as a mechanical engineer at an automotive supplier. By law, his employer is obliged to give him time off for his THW duty.
It's nice to know that we can help people who really need it. If we can provide support from here in Germany, I think we should do it.
Over 200 THW volunteers participated in aid missions to Ukraine last year. This is the first mission of the new year. About 2,000 kilometers lie ahead of them.